and explosive devices to Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, major Democratic donor George Soros, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Maxine Waters, and CNN. Authorities don't have a suspect yet, but based on the intended targets, they have released this sketch.
Well, talk to anybody responsible for forming our perceptions about news or culture in this country, talk show hosts, late-night comedians, and almost all of them will admit that hatred in America, American against American, is getting to crisis and scary levels, and they feel sad about it. Ask them who's responsible, though, and they will always point to people they disagree with politically. They will never concede that their unreasonableness or their stupidity had anything to do with creating the culture that they so disapprove of. Are they right? Joe Concha watches the media for a living for the Hill newspaper, and he joins us tonight. Joe, thanks a lot for coming on. So I wonder if the news media, and I'm happy to include myself in that, played some role in getting us to where we are, do you think?
I think absolutely, Tucker, no question about it. I mean, Colbert and his 17 writers must have been taking cues from certain quarters of cable news. And I'm going to bring up CNN in a second, and I wish I didn't have to, because I'm sure if you were in that building yesterday, you're just some associate producer, you're just a guy who's an editor, a cameraman, and somebody on air. You must have been horrified by what you were experiencing.
And there's some really, I used to work there. There are a lot of nice people over there. I felt sorry for them. I always do. Sorry for that.
Absolutely. I still have friends there, too, as well. And look, I was hoping the network then, therefore, would be measured and sober and like the old CNN of Aaron Brown and Campbell Scott, Bernard Shaw, and just pursue the facts without pointing fingers and particularly going after the president, as they so often reflexively do. And then I'm watching one anchor, John King, who's been there for a while and who I like, and he said this today, he said, no one is blaming the president. Is anyone blaming the president? Because the president now wants to make this about him. And then I asked your producers to put up these two chyrons, or basically the lower thirds that you see right there, graphics basically. And here's one of them. It says, Trump has no plans to bear any personal responsibility for inciting serial bomber, which assumes an awful lot when you think about it. And it sounds like 2011 when Gabby Giffords, Tucker, in Arizona, right? Sarah Palin was accused of that shooting because she targeted that district, targeted as in we want to take it back politically, and people automatically assume the shooter, Jared Loughner, had carried it out because Sarah Palin incited him to. It turns out he had no political leanings whatsoever, and he was just a deranged individual, right? And then the second Chiron, I'll just get this for you real quick. Manhunt for serial bomber going after Trump's targets. I mean, this is unbelievably irresponsible. We work in the least self-aware business in the industry. You look at these people and you say, how could you be so obtuse? Is it intentional? So I thought I'd get a different CNN. I thought they'd be measured, and instead I got these kind of chyrons pointing the finger at the president when they have no idea what incited this deranged lunatic that's sending all these bombs.
Well, that's right. I mean, if there are copies of emails between Trump and the mad bomber saying, you know, go ahead, take out my enemies, then, but there aren't those. I mean, have I missed news developments tonight?
No, you have not. And you say, does the media bear responsibility? Look at the New York Times on Monday, Tucker, right? I mean, they had a story about, they talked to 5 fictional writers fantasizing about how the president will be removed from office, including an assassination by a Secret Service agent. I mean, what? That's the Gray Lady, the prominent news organization pushing this crap, and it's crap, Tucker. And they're absolutely responsible, partly responsible for the temperature of this country today.
I don't want to add to that garbage. I hope the show doesn't. I really mean that. Joe, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Most of the year trying to make us, like her, Earth Mother liberals. And I've thought a lot about her in the year since because I deeply resented this. Not because I was some right-winger, but because even as a first grader, I didn't like having views forced down my throat. But in retrospect, her politics have in some ways become my politics. The things that she cared about, you know, the struggle of the poor versus the weak, the environment, and the environment in the most basic sense, you know, is the air dirty, or is the water clean, you know, basic environmental concerns. She loved animals. She thought the American Indians were cool. And in the course of thinking through this book before I wrote it, I was thinking of her and thinking of how few people like her still exist and how bewildering she must find the world now, where the people who claim to have the views that she has, or had anyway, are kind of aligned with these enormous corporations against the powerless. And it's just, she was, to me, kind of a metaphor for how so inverted our politics are from the way they were when I was a kid.
I want to show you a close-up photograph of your cover and then go around the horn as quickly as we can. It should be right up there on that screen. You can see those folks there. I just need a couple of lines from you on Maxine Waters.
Maxine Waters is a congresswoman from Los Angeles, whose district has gone from being overwhelmingly African-American, overwhelmingly Hispanic, which is sort of a window into the demographic change that's really reshaped our politics. But more than anything, she is a person for whom race describes every problem and every answer to every problem. And part of the argument I make in the book is that most racial debates in this country are really economic debates, and that the race question, while real, and there's a history of, obviously, of racial sadness here, are a distraction from what we need to be talking about, which is how the economy is apportioned.
Mitch McConnell.
Mitch McConnell, obviously the Senate Majority Leader, and an accomplished tactician, and I would never argue an evil person, but in some ways kind of the embodiment of the political establishment in Washington, and maybe an impediment to the sort of change that we need.
Jeff Bezos.
Well, the richest man in the world, founder, primary owner of Amazon, but also a progressive activist. And the case I make, which I sincerely believe, is that his progressive activism is both a smokescreen behind which he hides, but also a kind of indulgence that he pays to the activist left to keep them from criticizing him over his labor practices.
I'm guessing Lindsey Graham.
That would be Lindsey Graham. I didn't do the art for this. Lindsey Graham, obviously senator from South Carolina, someone I've known for a long time, smart, capable person, but also one of the sort of leading advocates for a thoroughly discredited foreign policy that is still, unfortunately, our nation's official policy, which would be neoconservatism.
Hillary Clinton.
Vanquished opponent of Donald Trump. I don't go into her views so much as in the book as I do into the attitudes that she embodies. But basically, the key political problem we face now is that nobody's learning the lessons of the last election, and there were lessons, I think, that we need to learn. And she sort of led the charge for ignoring those lessons in favor of ridiculous explanations like Russia.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Founder of Facebook, and someone whom I would argue in an earlier time would have come under real scrutiny from liberals for the way he's conducted his business practices, and who would be, I think, under attack for what his company has done to privacy in the United States, but isn't, because he's a member of a pretty small social class that kind of makes all the decisions and provides all the news coverage.
Nancy Pelosi.
Nancy Pelosi, part of the, obviously former House Speaker, perhaps future House Speaker, but part of the Democratic Party that doesn't exist anymore, that's about to be swept away by the activists taking over the party and probably doesn't know it.
Bill Kristol.
My former boss at the Weekly Standard, and a very humane boss, I would say, but one of the people in Washington who, never liked Trump, which is entirely legitimate, obviously, but who has been, I would say, sadly, driven crazy by Trump, and wound up taking positions that he never would have held were it not for Trump. Someone who's deeply threatened by the existence of Trump, far out of proportion to Trump's threat, I would argue, and is kind of a sad sort of case study in how you can be destroyed by this stuff if you let it.
In your introduction, you say our leaders are fools, unaware that they are captains of a sinking ship. This book is about them. I assume it's about those folks up there.
Yes.
Why are they fools?
They're fools for two reasons. Because they made a series of very large and catastrophic bad decisions, not without precedent in human history. A lot of people make bad decisions. I have made bad decisions. That doesn't make you a fool. It makes you a human. When you refuse to acknowledge that you made those decisions, and then further, maybe more significantly, refuse to learn from those mistakes and correct your behavior and readjust your theories, then you are a fool and you should not be in charge of anything. And on, again, the big questions of war and peace, questions of economic policy, questions of social policy, the only questions that matter, they've done that. They made really bad decisions. They hurt the country. I would forgive them for that in a second. I supported personally a number of those decisions. So it's not like I'm Nostradamus here. But I'm also not an idiot, so I could see that these decisions didn't work out as advertised. And why is that? Take 10 minutes and think it through. They never did. And so they don't deserve to rule.
We think this may have been your first appearance here on C-SPAN in 1995. That's your first year in town. Let's watch.
Well, I grew up in a town called La Jolla, California, which is in San Diego County.
and I left there to go to school back east. I went to school in Connecticut at Trinity College in Hartford. And then I left there in 1991, got married, and moved to Washington and began writing for a magazine called Policy Review at the Heritage Foundation. I spent a couple of years there, and then I went to Little Rock, Arkansas to write editorials for the newspaper there, the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, for a man named Paul Greenberg. And I came back about a year and a half ago to write a book on crime, which I'm just finishing up. And in August, I came to work at the Weekly Standard, which started in September of this year.
Why did you get rid of that bow tie?
I don't know, but I'm glad I quit smoking because I can hear the Camels in my voice there. You can tell I'm both hungover and smoking too much. That's the first thing I noticed, and obviously I'm fat, which kind of goes, for me, it's like every other year I gain too much weight, and I'm like, wait, my clothes have shrunk.